We're the only ones there so far. Yeah. Oh, just hold on a second. He's done saying. It's somebody to come on. Maybe there's no shiur.
You think so?
I don't know. They wish yesterday, today at 8 o'clock.
We're the only ones.
Sorry, I can't turn this on.
Hi, Yomi.
Hello.
Ezra.
All good. I
Good.
see. Haven't seen you in a while.
It was
Well,
the
I'm around.
Yeah.
You still have the shiur with the chazan?
Do I still have the shiur? Yeah, we had it this. It was at Mark's house.
Well, I see.
So you didn't get a message, or maybe were you around on Thursday?
I have every day a shiur at 5:15, so it's not.
It's not working at that time. I hear
Yeah.
you.
So
Shavua Tov, Shavua Tov.
Hello.
who's here?
Okay.
How was the simcha?
Very nice, Baruch Hashem. Very nice. It was
What was it?
a bar mitzvah.
Oh,
It was very nice.
Rabbi Krupkin's younger son,
His
oldest.
first grandson to have a bar mitzvah. His oldest son's,
Tuvia.
yeah, Tuvia.
and he didn't come to the bar mitzvah?
Of course he came.
Of course, everybody was there.
Oh, really?
Sure.
Yeah.
His grandson, of
Where
course.
did you stay?
We stayed at a hotel, but we had our meals at Maury's fireplace, and La Gondola was the caterer. It was really nice. It was very good, delicious,
Good.
and it was fun. It was.
Okay, next week there's no Navi Shiur. Susie and I have a wedding that night.
Ooh,
One of my Persian partners is getting married. So
How old is he?
For the first time?
first time, yeah.
yes.
How old is he?
And Ernie's, you're getting a bracha. No, you're
I'm
signing.
signing his ksuba. Yeah, it's an Orthodox. I mean,
Yeah,
How old is he?
religious
it's a
wedding.
religious wedding.
35?
He's probably 35. Yeah,
Yeah, they don't get married earlier.
and he's marrying a radiologist.
Whose parents are both doctors.
Yeah,
That's what
That's
Is he
it.
also Persian?
or Israeli, something
I
like that.
think Persian.
That's nice.
Very nice,
Yeah.
beautiful.
So what are you gonna wear?
We're doing the shiur here. Come on.
Good. I think we're on tape. I'll tell you later.
Kidding you.
Okay, we are on Sefer Ezra, Perek Vav, Pasuk Yud Daled. That's where we left off. So last week we went through there was the governor of Ever Anar, which is Eretz Yisrael, had seen they had been given a nevuah by the Navi Chagai to start rebuilding the Beis Hamikdash after 18 years after it had been stopped. At the time, even Koresh, the Persian king, He allowed them initially to go back, but then he stopped it under the pressure of Haman's sons, and other enemies. And now, 18 years later, Darius the second, which is Daryavish or Artaxerxes, who is Esther and Achashverosh's son, according to Chazal, is now gave them the permission. And the governor had sent a letter, do you give permission? And he sent back, yes, I give permission, and you have to help them. And you have to do it quickly. And that's where we left off. So, Pasuk Yudalit. So I found, in the Mikros Gedolos, the Ralbag translates all the Aramaic psukim into Hebrew. So let's learn Aramaic first. V'shaveh Yehudayoi banin umatzlichin b'nevuah Chagai Neviah uZachariah bar Ido. The Saveh refers to the elders, the Jewish elders, built banin umatzlichin, and were successful, as predicted by the Nevuah of Chagai and Zechariah the Nevi'im. Ubanu v'sechlalu, they built and they laid the foundations. Min tam Elohai Yisrael, by the command of the God of Israel. Umitem Koresh v'Daryavish, with the consent of Cyrus the king and Darius. V'Artaxerxes melech Paras. That's the pasuk. And the Ralbag reads it, V'ziknei Yehuda bonim umatzlichim b'nevuat Chagai Navi Zechariah ben Ido, ubanu v'chonenu mitam Elohei Hashamayim umitam Koresh v'Daryavish, banu beis Hashem k'moshen izkarat savasam b'zeh makom. Rashi, Save Yehuda Ziknei Yehudim Hayubonim Matzlichim B'mlachtam. The elders were building and they were successful. B'nevuas Chagai Zechariah Ubanu v'yasdu et habinyan. They built and laid the foundation of the structure. Min sivui Elohei Yisrael, through the command of God. Umershus, with the permission of Koresh Melech Paras Harishon. Asher huchal yisod habinyan b'yamav. Right, Koresh initially gave them permission. They started coming up with Zerubbabel and they laid the foundations. They even started offering korbanos, like we learned in Perek Beis and Gimel. Umershus, this new permission of Daryavish Zemelech Paras.
Isn't Daryavish Koresh?
Okay, we have the original Koresh, right? We have the original Koresh. Then there was a Darius prior to Koresh, who was the first Persian king. He's Darius the first. After Koresh, you had Achashverosh. After Achashverosh, you have Daryavish Hasheni, who here is referred to as Daryavish, as well as Artaxerxes, and as well as Koresh. He has all three names. But here Rashi says that the original Koresh is the original Koresh who let them come back. Now, what does it mean by the command of Hashem? Meaning through the Nevi'im. Because through Chagai and Zechariah, they were given the command by Hashem.
Where is this name Artaxerxes came?
So I'm going to read you the Gemara. We've had this Gemara a few times already. This is in Seder Olam. Einatam motzei paras blachim elashnayim, Koresh v'Daryavish. Ulamadai, the Medes shnayim, Daryavish v'Achashverosh. Elahu Koresh, hu Daryavish, hu Artaxerxes. So his name was Darius. He's called Koresh because he was kosher, and he's Artaxerxes is like the name Pharaoh in Egypt. Like all the kings of Egypt are called Pharaoh. So the same thing, the Seder Olam says, Lefishakola Malchus Nikres Artaxerxes. Or for example, later on in Egypt's history was Ptolemy the first, Ptolemy the second, there was Ptolemy the 14th. All the Egyptian kings were called Ptolemy. So Artaxerxes is another name. Now, Chazal are going to learn also the word Artaxerxes comes from the Rishus that he gave to Nehemiah to come and rebuild the walls of Yerushalayim. This we're going to learn later in Sefer Nehemiah. Now, when it says Hashem's command, the Malbim says these are workings of divine providence, cloaked in the proclamation of mortal kings, which caused the construction of the temple. In a hidden miracle, the will of God turned the hearts of Cyrus and Darius and caused them to grant permission for the temple restoration. Bayis Sheni was built through hidden miracles because the returning exiles were unworthy of the revealed miracles which brought about the first conquest of the Holy Land through Yoshua, like the collapse of the walls of Jericho, Shemesh Begivon Dome, that they destroyed 31 Malachim with a small army. The Gemara in Brachos, Daled Amud Aleph, says, the door of Ezra was destined for redemption as miraculous as in the days of Yoshua, but their misdeeds prevented this. So Rashi, what Tzvi asked, you have three names here, Koresh, Daryavish, Artaxerxes. Rashi learns that both of these names refer to Darius, who was the present monarch, who allowed the completion of the temple. He was entitled Artaxerxes, a name shared by all the Persian kings like the Egyptian pharaoh. The Ralbag, the Balamor, learns that this Artaxerxes is a third Persian king who reigned at a later date, who gave permission to Nehemiah to rebuild the walls. But that's not according to the majority opinion. Ibn Ezra says Artaxerxes is Achashverosh. And this Darius is Darius the Mede, who I said was before Koresh. But then, of course, the building was completed during Daryavish Hasheni, Achashverosh and Esther's son. Now, there's a Gemara in Megillah, Lamed Aleph, Tanya, emphasizing on the words Savei Yehuda, the elders of the Jews. Reb Shimon ben Elazar Omer, Im Yomru Lecha Zakenim store, if the elders tell you break down these walls, V'yeladim b'nei, and the younger generation says to build, store the altivneh. You should break it down and don't build. Mimnei shestira zakenim binyan ubinyan na'arim stira. When zakenim, their satira, their breaking down, is construction when compared to construction of na'arim. And the Tosefta explains this is referring even on Binyan Beis Hamikdash. So Rab Shimon Schwab, he was dayak from this pasuk that we just read. You notice the pasuk called Chagai Navi, but it didn't call Zechariah Bar Ido a Navi. He explained Shenavua Zechariah lo iskaima b'shleimus. Zechariah had nevu prophecies. She isnabesh yashuvu b'tshuva shlema. He says yashuvu elai v'ashuv aleichem. But that part was not miskayim. They didn't do tshuva. So because of that, he's not called a Navi here. To also comment on Tzvi's question, why is he called Koresh and Daryavish and Artaxerxes? So Look at Rashi. Rashi in Artaxshasta says, Hu Daryavish, v'nita Artaxshasta al Shema Medina v'Malchus, ki chol malchei Paras hayu nikroim kach, kasher kol malchei Mitzrayim nikrim far. We read that already. Now, why is that? Because Darius is the one who gave the permission for them to rebuild the Beis Hamikdash after all the 18 years that had stopped. He also provided funds for it. The Gemara in Rosh Hashanah, Gimel Amud Beis, Tana, Hu Koresh, Hu Daryavesh, Hu Artaxshasta. It's referring to the same person. Koresh, Shemelech Kosher Haya. It's a play on words. He was a kosher king. Artaxshasta al Shem Malchusa. Umash Shmo, Daryavesh Shmo, but his real name was Darius. Tosfos says, Hu Koresh, Hu Daryavesh, Hu Artaxshasta, Shloshtan Ksuvim B'chad Kra. All three names are in the same pasuk, which we just learned. As I said, it's the Ralbag who says Artaxshasta is because is a different thing, because eventually permission is given to Nehemiah by one of the Persian kings 20 years later, in the 20th year of Daryavish, to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. Okay, let's go weiter. Pasuk Tezvav. V'sheitzi beis adina ad yom tlasa liyarech adar. The temple was finished on the third day of Adar, which was the 6th year of the reign of Melech Darius. Now, if you remember, Darius gave them permission to start building in the 2nd year. Comes out that it took them 4 years to build. By the way, what day of the year did the beginning of the Bayis Sheni start? Chafei Kislev, Chanukah. Again, the miracle of Chanukah is not going to take place until 200 years later. But the Chanukas, or let's say the foundation, the beginning of the building was the 25th of Kislev. The finishing was, as we said, Gimel Ba'adar. And so you see Chanukah and Purim, both of those Yomim Tovim were established during the period of Bayis Sheni. Now we have to ask the question, the Ramat Vali asked the question, Shlomo HaMelech, when he built Bayis Rishon, it took him 7 years. We learned that in Sefer Malachim, Perek Ches. Now, Bayis Sheni took 4 years. Says the Ramat Vali, Ki abinyan shel Shlomo haya rishon, aval b'minyan hasheni kvar nisharu hirshimu shel hakdusha rishona. So first of all, there was leftover kedusha that remained from Bayis Rishon. Lifichach hispiku adalad shavim. Ki hirshimu anishar hu ezer gadol amshichas hakedusha. So he says, spiritually, there was Kedusha.
Is it possible that they didn't have to go to Lebanon to get the Arzei Levanon to rebuild the Beis Hamikdash, and that is why it was a faster process?
No, they did have to go. Remember, we said that they got trees from Lebanon. In Perek Beis or Gimel, when they started talking about the building, they did get trees.
Okay, thanks for reminding me.
But I think when he says then it says like this, the Ari says, like, it's like Tfilas Mincha, she'ein tzarech lahagdim elea kol haseder shel Shachris. Think about it. During Shachris, we have Psuki de Zimra, then there's a whole Birchas Kriya Shema, then we say Shmon Esrei. By Mincha, we say Ashrei, and we go right into Shemon Esrei. The Ari says It's because there's no need for it. Because we've already laid the foundations during Shachris. Lefi she'adayin hu yom v'nishar yershimo shel Shachris atzmo. The leftover kedusha of Shachris remains. V'lachein dai b'torus me'at k'dei lahachnis es hakdusha lahashlim es hazivug. So the Ramat Vali says the same thing with the rebuilding by Sheni. There was still the kedusha that Shlomo Melech invested there. So Rashi says, I mean Pasuk Tesvav, Sof Tashlum Bayizaya Ad Yom Ashlish L'Chodesh Adar, Shishna Sheish L'Daryav Shamelch, the 6th year of his reign. V'nimtza binyan habayit haya arba shanim. It was 4 years to build. Pasuk Tez Zayin. Vavadu bnei Yisrael, I'm sorry. Yeah. Vavadu bnei Yisrael kahania levia, the bnei Yisrael, the Kohanim, the Leviim, ushar bnei Galusa, the rest of the exiles. Chanukah Beis Laha Dena Bechedva. They celebrated the inauguration of Bayis Sheni with great simcha. When it says the Israelites, right, Bnei Israel, refers to the Jews. When it refers to the Shar Bnei Galusa, there were other people who came up. In the Sinim, we talked about they were descendants of Shlomo Melech's slaves. It was listed in Perek Beis. Now, this Chanukah, the Malbim says, they had in mind another temple, Bayis Shlishi, which is going to be built by Hashem out of fire. It's going to come down fully constructed. Rashi in Sukkah 41a says that Bayis Shlishi will be built by Hashem and will descend from heaven. As it says in Az Yosher, Migdash Hashem konanu yadecha, your sanctuary built by your hands. The Jewish settlers hoped that their celebration would be immediately followed by the miraculous appearance of the third temple. And then there would be another celebration in its honor. That's why it says, Chanukas Beis Eloha Dena, this temple. Because to be followed by a celebration of the Bayis Shlishi. What's the chedva, the simcha? Because Gimel Adar is when they finished. We're going to see soon that they celebrated for 14 days. Or, excuse me, they celebrated for 21 days. We're going to, during the time of the Mishkan, the celebration of the Miluim was 7 days. Then when Shlomo HaMelech built Bayis Rishon, remember they celebrated 14 days. They started on the 7th of Tishrei, and they celebrated even on Yom Kippur that year. And they went through Sukkot. So Moshe, 7 days. Shlomo HaMelech, 14 days. So they added another 7 days, 21. So Purim is on the 15th of Adar in Yerushalayim, right? So it's the Malbim says that the simcha of the Chanukah Beis Hamikdash was even greater than the Purim festivities. If you remember when we read Perek Gimel, that when they laid the foundations, there were elderly Jews who remembered the first bias and they cried. Here, there's no mention of crying. Now, this is now 18 years later, after they laid the foundations. Now they're finishing up the bias. It's actually more. It's 22 later, because 18 years he allowed them to start, then it took 4 years. So some say there's no crying anymore because those Zakanim are not alive anymore. They're too old. But others say the simcha was so great because they saw the siyata d'shmaya, that they were able to build and complete despite all the enemies and despite all the problems that they had. So that caused the extra simcha. Others say it's the hashros hashchina. By completion of the binyan that provided the simcha. The Gemara in Tainis, Dav Chavav says, when we darshan in Shir Hashirim, it says, B'yom chatunato u'v'yom simchat libo. Darshans the Gemara, Yom simchat libo ze binyan beis hamikdash. So simcha is connected to the Chanukah Sabayis. So, Harav Chaim Kanievsky, the Gadol who passed away not long ago, the son of the Stipler, writes, Matzinu b'chol hamakomot she'asu zecher lechanukas habayis v'hamizbeach. We see in all other examples, they made a zecher to the Chanukas habayis. For example, kechanukat hamizbeach b'mei hashmonaim. You have the holiday of Hanukkah, the Chanukah Bayis Rishon, that according to the Gra, one of the reasons we don't say Tachnun between Yom HaKippurim and Sukkot is because that's when Bayis Rishon was finished. And the Tur brings that from Chodesh Nisan, we also don't, because that's when the Nesiim, don't say Tachlim, because the Nesiim brought Korbanos. Josephus, the great historian, the Tosfos Yontif brings, that when Herod, the Jewish king, right, B'yom Chanukas Binyan Hurdus, Hayu Noagim Lasos Yontif, was also Yontif. But we don't see any kind of holiday of this Bayis Sheni that's being built, that's being described here. Like on the 3rd of Adar. Says the Ramban, Kanire lo haya sham beis din hagadol sheyitkanu. Ezra has not come up yet to establish the Ansei Knesset Agdola and to make a big Beis Din. So perhaps there was no Yontif established because there was no Beis Din to establish it. We talked about the Bayis Shlishi that
Ernie.
yes.
So Darius is the one who allowed us to build it, but Herod built it, the second temple.
No. Right now the temple's being built. Bayis Sheni
Right.
is built now.
Yes.
Herod is 350 years in the future, where he remodeled it.
Oh, okay.
Herod gave Shiputzim to Bayis Sheni.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
And so they made the walls taller, and he made it more in a Roman style.
Oh, so he came much later.
300 years later. Herod died 6 CE, the time of Hillel Abavli, about 60 years before the destruction of Bayis Sheni, is when Herod was.
Yeah, because everybody calls it Herod's the
Right, but he remodeled it. He remodeled it. The Malbim is the one who says in Bimei Moshe the Miluim was 7 days. In the times of Shlomo was 14 days. Bimei Ezra was 21. Then he says in the future when Bayis Shlishi is built, it's going to be a 28-day yontif, because each time is added 7 days. Now, the Navi Zechariah in Perek Ches of the famous Pasuk, Komar Hashem Tzvakos, Tzoma Revi, V'tzoma Chamishi, V'tzoma Shvi, V'tzoma Asiri, Yiyeh lebeis Yisrael l'sos and l'simcha l'moadim toivim. Now that the Jews have come back to Eretz Yisrael and have built Bayis Sheni, so Tzom Gedalia, Asera B'Teves, Yud Zayin Tammuz, and Tisha B'Av are going to be Yom Tovim. There's not going to be any sadness anymore. And Rashi in Rosh Hashanah says, Al Yedei HaChurban, Hukbu L'Tzom, these days were established because of the Churban to be fast days. V'Al Yedei HaBinyan, Hukvu L'Yontif. It was the binyan of Bayis Sheni that now they switched to become Yomim Tovim. And when Zechariah says that while they were building, because remember, Darius let them build in the 2nd year of his reign. It finished in the 6th year of his reign. But in the 4th year of his reign, they sent a letter to the Bnei Agola. Ha'efkeh b'chodesh ha'chamishi? Ha'nezer kasher asisi? Are we going to cry in the month of Av? So v'lachen kishenigmar binyan hitmaleh simcha ba'olam. There was great simcha in the world because there was not going to be all these fast days. Says in Shulchan Aruch, Orach Chaim Samech Gimel, Roy lechol yirei shamayim, lios meitzer v'doig al churban Beis Hamikdash. We should always be sad about the Beis Hamikdash. The Groth there says, because kol hamisabel al Yushalayim, zoche v'roeh b'simchasa. Whoever mourns properly will merit seeing it. So when these people physically saw the rebuilding of the Beis Hamikdash, they were very happy. We're just explaining the chedva, the extra simcha, the word chedva. Pasuk Yud Zayin. Ve'akriv l'chanukas Beis Eloha. They brought korbanos. Beis Eloha Dina, this temple. Toirin Meah, 100 oxen. Dichrin Masan, 200 rams. Imrin Arbamea, 400 sheep. Then, Tzviri Izin Lachti al Kol Yisrael Treyasar. They bought 12 goats as a korban chatas, Leminyan Shivte Yisrael, to atone for the 12 tribes. Now, the Malbim says these korbanos were brought b'hoyrah Shah. The Chachamim are empowered to institute something on a temporary basis. So Rashi says, "Ikrivu l'chanukas beis zeh korbanos halalu v'hoyrah Shah isa." Rashi says it was hoyrah Shah. Permission, temporary permission. The Nevi'im, says the Malbim, approved it. There's a Gemara in Tmura, 15b, Horia 6a, that only the korbanos brought later on by Ezra, when he comes up to Eretz Yisrael, that was a hoyrah Shah. It doesn't mention these. But the Malbim and the Metzudah say that those statements in the Gemara that says it was hoyrah Shah refers to these as well. Now, the Ramban says that there's a din, it's not hoyrah Shah. You're supposed to bring korbanos when you inaugurate a bayis l'Hashem. It's required by biblical law. Anytime there's an opening of a temple service, and the Ramban says it was fulfilled at this time by Ezra's door. The Rambam says no, they were not a choiv, but they were brought benadova, and that's why they say that it was a hoirosha, but not a choiv. The Ramban says it's a mitzvah l'doros, as it says ve'ata titzaveh asher taseh v'zeh asher taseh lamizbeach. Mitzvahs chinuch. When the Mishkan was brought, they brought korbanos. When the Beis Hamikdash by Shlomo Melech, they brought korbanos. And it's a choiv according to Ramban. And the Gemara, Daf Imenachos Memei, Rav Ashi Milui Mikruvi B'mei Ezra Kedech Shekruvi B'mei Moshe. So it fits with the Ramban. And it wasn't just at the time of Aaron and his sons when they were instituted and inaugurated into that work. It's every time that you inaugurate Kohanim, you need to introduce them with korbanos. By the way, the Nesiim went on their own to bring the korbanos. But the Ramban in Perush HaTorah also says, Hashem HaNichbad Hiskim al Das HaNesiim. He agreed. Like that's when it said, Nasi Echad Layom Yakriv. And therefore he says, Yitachen Shu Mitzvah L'Doro Sheichanchu La'olam. And so too Shlomo did, and so too they did in the time of Ezra, and says the Ramban Limos HaMashiach. It says in Yechezkel Mem Gimel Shivas Yomim Yichapru Samizbeach V'tiaru, so that they'll spend 7 days cleaning, and on the eighth day they'll bring korbanos. You're talking about by Shlishi. The Ramban compares it, the fact that the Nesiim brought their own korbanos and Hashem agreed to it, to two other parshas in the Torah. The parshas of Tmeim on Pesach and the Bnei Yosef. Remember, the people who were Tomei when they were doing the Korban Pesach in the Midbar, the year after they came out of Mitzrayim, they said, Lama ni gara, why should we lose out? So the parsha of Pesach Sheni came about because of the desire of the people themselves. Hashem was maskim to them. And then later on, came B'nai Sloifchad Doivrois. The B'nai Sloifchad were the first Zionists. And Hashem agreed that whole parsha was not originally going to be written in the Torah. It was written in the Torah on their basis. The idea came from them. So too the concept of Chanukas HaMizbech and the Chanukas with the Miluim. It was like the Nesiim. So how do you, Rashi says it's Rosh. How do you fit it with the Ramban who says it's a Choiv? So they say because which Korbanos was a Rosh? By the way, we said that during the time of Shlomo HaMelech, when they did a 14-day, they started Zion Tishrei, they didn't fast on Yom Kippur. Who gave them the right to do that? So they learned the Kal V'chomer from the Chanukas HaMishkan, because Ephraim, Nasi Ephraim, he brought his korbanos on Shabbos, even though it was a korban yochid, and normally a korban yochid is not doicha Shabbos. So the Beis Hamikdash in the time of Shlomo, which is even more holy than the Mishkan, they did a kal v'chomer that you could eat on Yom Kippur, because it's Yom Kippur is less stringent than Shabbos. Shabbos, if you violate Shabbos, you get capital punishment. On Yom Kippur, if you violate Yom Kippur, you get kores. Pasuk Yud Ches. Ve'kimu kahanya b'pulkton, v'levaya b'machluk kton. The Kohanim were in their groups, and the Leviim in their divisions. Alavidat elahad Yerushalayim, for the service of Hashem in Yerushalayim, kiksav safar de Moshe. So the Kohanim were organized into groups. Shmuel Hanavi and Melech David had established 24 groups of Kohanim. Each would serve in the Beis Hamikdash 1 week at a time, twice. So that covered 48 weeks. The others were the Yomim Tovim. Each group was divided into Batei Av. And that family performed all the functions during that 1 day a week. So the Levium were also divided into 24 groups. Each one worked for 1 week, and it was also subdivided into families. Each family serving 1 day, carrying out all the duties of the Levium. So the Malbim says that the Kohanim had 7 Batei Av for each day, but what exactly the Kohanim would do was left open, and then they drew lots. You know, you'd have 80 Kohanim stand around in a circle, and they would put out 1 or 2 fingers, and the Mamuna would choose a number, 47, and they go around and count fingers, and that person would do that avoda. We have that in the Gemara. But the Leviim were given special work. You to sing, or you to chant. The Leviim also were guarding the temple and gatekeepers and opening and closing the gates. And when we say Kiksav Sfar Moshe, because it's in Vayikra that says the Kohanim do the korbanos, and in Bamidbar it says the Leviim. We just added in last week's parsha Bamidbar, next week's Naso, that the Leviim, each one does a different service. Right. So the Malbim says, "Hakohan min schalku lechav dal mishmoros, kol echad b'shavu acheres v'kol mishmar mitchalek lezayin batei avos, kol echad yavor b'yom echad." Each one did 1 day of that week.
We decided to do the first Mishmar, the second 2 weeks. Who decided that?
No. So they did 24 weeks, means 1 week for 24 weeks.
Yeah.
Then 24 weeks again. So they each worked in the Beis Hamikdash for 2 weeks.
But who decided who were the first one to do it, and the last year?
No. So there's an order, in Divrei Yomim, it gave us the name of all 24 families. Now, not as many families came back. So there was. Remember, we learned it was either 4 or 6, but they divided them up, so they took care of all 24.
Who made the division? Who did it?
So there were Shmuel Hanavi and David HaMelech established the 24 Mishmaros.
Yeah.
They're the ones who established it. This
So
family, that family.
They decide.
And this remained until Golus Bavel, and the same families came back from Bavel. But like we said, not all of them.
But it was much more Kohanim than to fill up for all year. I mean, altogether, there is so many Kohanim, more than the...
Well, remember, we said each week had 7 Batei Av, families within that family, and each family worked 1 day of the week.
So next year, it wasn't the same people, because there is much more Kohanim to fill up for 1 year. There's much more Kohanim than that.
Why do you say that?
How do you know that fact?
What? Let's say each family that worked a day with 20 or 30 Kohanim,
Okay.
right? So in 1 week, 7 times 20, you're talking 140, 200 Kohanim. That's one family. You divide 20, so you divide 200, multiply 200 by 24, you have 4,000. Look in Vayikra. Look at the count we just had. There were only, Bamidbar said there were 22,000 Levium, and there were like 8,000 Kohanim. So the numbers stem. Now remember, only 29,000 Jews came back with Ezra, with Zerubbabel.
So
How many were Kohanim? Much less.
That's the thing, that there were much less Jews who came back. That's why you had that Mishmar. I don't know if that's for the first big Beis Hamikdash they had the same Mishmar.
Well, yeah, because it says David HaMelech and Shmuel Hanavi established it.
Mhm.
No, but remember we said of the 24 family Kohanim, only like 6 came back with Ezra.
Right. Well, then they
But then they took all those 6 and they divided them up into 24. Those 6 families were made 24 mishmaros.
yeah. But what did they do in the first Beis Hamikdash?
So there they mamish had 24 distinct mishmaros,
Right.
and enough to fill that all up. Okay, Pasuk Yutes. Vayasub ne'agolas haPesach. V'arbasar l'chodesh harishon. Because remember, we're talking about Gimel Adar, 21 days, right? So you're at the end of Adar. Now comes Nisan. Now you have to do the Korban Pesach. And it describes that the Bnei Goyla came and they did the Korban Pesach. And this year was no Pesach Sheni needed. Everybody was Tohor. Because we're going to see Be'echad Kulam Tohorim. They were all Tohor. Through their desire and their Ratzon to be Makriv, they were very careful and they were able to do it with state of Tahara. Says Rashi, Achshav Asu Yisrael Zapesach Barbasar Benisan Zeh Bo Achar Adar Zehu Shlama Binyan Bo. It sounds like, because remember, they had laid the foundations already 18 years before. And remember, they offered korbanos when they built the Mizbeach. It sounds like the Korban Pesach had not been offered until now. And the Achronim ask, how come they didn't makri the Korban Pesach until now? They were being makri of other things. So Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky in the Emes Liakov says, Hinei b'Sefer Ezra, kasher nivdalu mitumas goy haaretz asus haPesach. When they got rid of all the tumah, they brought the Pesach. V'chein matzinu b'Chizkiah. Chizkiah Melech, when we learn in Malachim, kishapir sha'am avodah zara, hayazeh korban harishon. Remember, Korban Pesach is connected to avodah zara because the sheep was the avodah zara in Mitzrayim. And we were told to take the sheep, and there was Mesiras Nefesh because they would have killed us. So the Korban Pesach is connected to Bittul Avodah Zarah. So we saw it by Chizkiah Melech, where he talks about when Chizkiah abolished all of the Avodah Zarah that had existed before him. Yoshua Melech did the same thing after Menashe. And that was part of the tshuva. What korban? We read that Haftorah in Pesach. Because it's the korban that's connected to remove your hands from Avodah Zarah. And we're going to see Ezra, this door, their wives, many of them were not Jewish. They had to separate from their wives. They got rid of this kind of Avodah Zarah business. In in the Emes Yaakov says something else, that Pesach is like Chag HaMalchus VeHa'Uma, because we became a nation on Chag HaPesach. And now by rebuilding Bayis Sheni, the Malchus Yisrael is reestablished. And that's why it was appropriate to celebrate the Pesach. Pasuk Chaf. Ki yitaru hakohanim v'alviim, ke'echad kulam tahorim. The Kohanim Leviim had purified themselves. Vayishchetu ha-Pesach l'bnei hagoyla. And they shechted the Pesach for all of the exiles. V'lachem ha-Kohanim v'lahem. For their brother Kohanim and for them. You cannot bring the Korban Pesach in a state of tumah. So you have to purify. That's why we read Parshas Parah prior to the Chag HaPesach. So they either went to the mikveh, and we're going to learn Chagai the Navi found ashes of the Parah Aduma in remaining walls that existed even from Bais Rishon. So those who needed that was able to be sprinkled Parah Aduma. Now, notice the shechita was done by the Leviim. But that's okay, because we've learned in Kodshim, non-Kohanim can do the shechita. From Kabbalah on has to be Kohanim. I saw something interesting here. The Tosefta in Masechta Parah says, Nechleku etanoim ketzad tiaru oile bavel eslav. How did they purify themselves? Rav Yehuda Omer, shematzu efer parah sheinichu lemishmeres ma'aparas betoch kosle beis hamikdash. Kirak hatikra shel beis hamikdash nisrafa, aval haktalim nisharu lamot. So first of all, he says that when Nebuchadnezzar destroyed the Beis Hamikdash, only the ceiling was destroyed. The walls remained, or some walls remained. And in the walls, Bahem Matzu is Efer HaPorah. And they found some ashes. Rav Shimon Omer, Efer Porah Yadi Reim Lebavel. That the Jews took Efer Porah with them to Babylonia. And Vishavi Ma'am, like I saw, they brought it back with them. Shekasher Halchu Legolos Notlu Emam Efer Porah. We menuch that's how they, when they came back, they were able to have Efer Parah with them. The Mishnah in Masechta Parah says, Harishona asa Moshe, V'ashniya asa Ezra. The first Parah Aduma was Moshe Rabbeinu burnt, and we had enough until this time. And then when Ezra came up, he made the second Parah. And the Meshech Chochmah says, Chagai Navi Gila Lahem es Makom Efer HaPorah. B'Nevuah, he told them where it was. I think that's fascinating. Pasuk Chav Beis. Vayasu Chag Matzoi Shivas Yamim B'Simcha. They celebrated Pesach 7 days. They call it Chag HaMatzos. Ki Simcha Maranoi. Hashem caused them to rejoice. They saved Lev Melech Ashur Aleihem. He turned the heart of the king of Assyria. We have to explain that. L'chazek Yedeyem. Bimlechas Beis Elohim Elohei Yisrael. In strengthening them in labor for the temple of God, the God of Israel. So, what is this Melech Lev Asher? We've only been talking about Koresh and Daryavesh with Artaxerxes. Why are they mentioning the king of Assyria? So remember, the 10 tribes had been taken prisoner by the Assyrians. And Yehuda and Binyamin remained, and the 10 tribes were exiled to Assyria. 100 years later, Yehuda and Benjamin are taken to Babylonia. But the Medes and the Persians conquered the Babylonians, right? The Babylonians had conquered the Assyrians. The Persian kings Cyrus and Darius, who ruled over the Jews, had been exiled to Babylon. They're the ones who permitted them to build a second temple. The Ramban holds that the Asaras Hashvatim never came back, and that the only settlers in Yerushalayim were Yehuda and Binyamin and a few representatives of other tribes. So therefore, according to the Ramban, this Melech Ashur refers to Darius, who extended aids to its subjects, the people of Yehuda and Binyamin. Why is he called Melech Ashur? Because Ashur is used interchangeably with Babylon. And since Darius presided over the Babylonian Empire, he can be called the king of Assyria. Ibn Ezra says there's a poignancy to the Persian king being described as the king of Assyria. The Assyrians had desolated the land of Israel during the First Temple period and exiled the 10 tribes. But now, this king of Persia, who also is ruling over Assyria and is thus a successor to the Assyrian kings, reversed their policy under the influence of divine inspiration and supported the construction of the temple. So the use of this title emphasizes the divine providence involved in the restoration. The Ralbag says, mentioning the Assyrian king indicates that besides the tribes of Yehuda and Benjamin, there were members of the other 10 tribes who also came back to Jerusalem. And Assyria then was like a province, there was a governor, and that's who they're referring to as the Melech Ashur. That's what Rashi and the Ralbag over somewhere else learns. Okay. Let me just see what I have here. Yeah. No, this I'll have to finish. Well, we'll finish. I think we finished. I think we did Perek Vav nicely.
Yeah.
Okay, and Mirza Hashem, in 2 weeks, Ezra Sofer arrives. He's introduced. We're going to go into his lineage, and we'll start the Ezra portion of Sefer Ezra. Any other comments, questions?
Yeah, let's hope that somebody can convince the Ayatollah to move on.
You mentioned last time about that, who was it, that he told him to pray for his family and that they only do it so they can get benefit. That's why he let them build the temple, which is a little bit weird to think that, I don't know. Then you won't talk about non-Jews that help Jews. I don't know. I thought
Yeah. We're gonna do that first next time.
Oh, okay.
And I have a whole. We should have gone back and done that. You should have asked me right away. But that's a good Shiloh.
Catch, Steve.
Huh?
What she said, I don't get
Good
it.
It's
catch.
bothersome. I mean, it's weird. Okay.
Don't forget, we can't forget.
Okay, no problem.
We'll do that.
Okay.
Ernie, you should say the
There is a lot of material on that. A lot.
Okay.
Ernie, you should say the vote that you said by Shada Shudas about the
Oh, my dog.
250-year anniversary.
So
My doggy.
yesterday was called Trump Shabbos because the president of the United States gave, I would say, he encouraged all the Jewish subjects of his country to commemorate Shabbos.
Right.
In recognition
Had a video.
recognition that this is the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, where there's freedom of religion and toleration. And we talked about a little bit of that between Mincha and Maariv today. So yesterday which was the Trump Shabbos, commemorating the 250th year, is Kaf Tet ER. So ER is 221 plus 29 is 250. Isn't that wild?
Yeah, it was on the WhatsApp.
Oh, somebody sent you that?
Yeah. But very good. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So number one, everybody have a
Every
great week.
Or
Number
something.
two,
Have a good-
Everyone should have a great Shavuos. Number 3, I'm doing a plug for the Yavna Shavuos dinner.
Yeah, everybody should come, member and non-member. Everybody is
Yeah.
welcome to everybody.
Tzvi, we're having a dinner. There's going to be nice divrei Torah.
I'm going to be in Lakewood.
That's not an excuse. That's not an excuse. Oh, you get a you get a mazel tov. What happened in Lakewood?
Finally, my daughter is nice enough to host us.
Oh,
Yeah,
Nice.
Beautiful.
got an invitation. That's
Nice.
good.
You can't turn down the invitation.
Exactly.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, enjoy the cheesecake.
Okay.
Have a Chag Sameach, everybody. Bye.
Okay. Bye.
I've charged my thing to the fullest 62%. I use so much every day. Okay.
Hello?